All right, so much art history and never enough time to cover it all. So let's go run through the art museum. All right, before we get into the Blue Rider, I want to talk about abstraction. So look at this painting, and then I have a little scale down below. And this is completely unscientific and arbitrary. I've made a scale. So on the far left is realistic, and then we have an abstract section, and then on the right is non objective. So, does this painting look realistic or abstract? It looks realistic. She looks like a real person, right? There's some imperfections in the proportions of her face, and but that would be of any. We all have imperfections of the proportions of our faces, so that's what makes her look real. This guy too. If you took my class last semester, you would remember the veristic portraits that we had for the Romans, and they concentrated on being realistic. And so this would be over here on this scale. What about this one? Is this realistic or abstract? How realistic is it? We're just beginning to get into abstraction. She is idealized. Right? Her skin tone is idealized. Her face is idealized. That face looks like it could be any woman's face, right? It doesn't look like a specific person, right? It's idealized. Do you remember this painting right here? This is her. It's like her bones are made out of rubber, right? And her leg was too long, and like it doesn't. It's the proportions are off. All right, so she's been abstracted. If you took my class last semester, you would know that this is unrealistic. All right, this is an idealized body. When we looked at Michelangelo's women, these women were abstracted. Right, look at her arms. Like, holy cow! Right, I bet she's a pro arm wrestler. All right. But that's very abstract. And then when we got into mannerism, these guys, all their bodies are elongated and they're quite abstract, right? We're getting closer to abstraction. If you remember Byzantine figures, those guys were very abstract, right? We're getting closer and closer to non-objective. And then we get into, modern art. And if we look at her, what's abstracted about her? It's the color, right? She still looks proportional, right? You can tell the academic training behind this artist. Even though he's trying to fight it, he can't fight painting her in proportion, right? So, or the abstraction is somewhat minimized. But this one right here, all right, we're getting more and more abstract. But you can still tell it's a person. What is this a painting of? It does look like a mountain. Yeah, right. It's a portrait. How can you tell it's a portrait? Yeah, it's got two eyes and a mouth. And it kind of looks like a neck, it kind of looks like a head, but you can see it though, right? If I said this is a portrait of a person, it's easy to see. But we're getting very abstract here. And what about this one? It's not a person? It is a person. All right. The head is up here. Do you see this dark shape? That's a head. There's shoulders here. There's arms here and here. This is a bit of an elbow right here. There's a bit of an elbow right here. And then the body is here. All right. But we are getting very abstract. Right? It's hard to see the actual person. But what about this one? We're talking about non objective art. Right? And this one too, this one's even going farther. It's just brushstrokes. That's all it is. So to recap, we've been on this journey now for what about 50 years, maybe 100 years. I'm going to say 100 years because this is neoclassical art. Right? The early 19th century was realistic. But once we get into the Impressionism movement, we are starting our journey to abstraction. And the Impressionism turns into Post Impressionism. And that turned into Fauvism. All right, we're going to get into Cubism soon. And this is all Cubism here. But now we're getting into this non-objective. It's all in a linear progression from realistic to non-objective. All right, so our next style of art is called Der Blaue Reiter, or Reiter, the Blue Rider, I'm going to call it. And we have two main artists for the Blue Rider, Vasily Kandinsky and Franz Marc. Kandinsky has an obsession with riders. Mark has an obsession with horses, and they both love blue. And the Blue Rider goal is to use form and symbolism to overcome the toxic modern world. I'll talk more about that in a minute. So just like the post-impressionists handed the baton of bright colors off to the German expressionists and Fauvists, then the De Broek is going to hand off bright colors to the Blue Rider. And so the De Broek is saying bright colors are good for expressing emotion. And the Blue Rider says, cool, we'll do that. And then we'll use color to explore spirituality of the soul. All right, so they're going to move beyond with color. De Broek and the Blue Rider both have some things in common and some things they are against. Both of them are against ancient and modern Western civilization and tradition. Both are skeptical of modern society, but De Broek points to what is wrong with modern society. Think about this painting of the street in Berlin. They're pointing to the things that are wrong. They're pointing to these women that are soulless. Modern art has made us soulless. That's what's wrong. The Blue Rider, they also don't like modern society, but they're pointing to the things that they want to go to. Let's go out into the country. Let's commune with nature. Let's talk to the animals. Nature and animals are unspoiled by modern society. So if we can get out of the city, go back into nature, then we will find our spiritual self. They are both using primitive art and culture from Africa and Oceania. Is it okay for art to be ugly? Look at De Broek. They love that ugly art. But the Blue Rider, they still want their stuff to be beautiful. And then De Broek is basically they're saying, look how shocking our world is, our modern world is. And Blue Rider is saying, let's transcend this alienation and focus on the spiritual. So then we get to the idea of what about total abstraction? When I say total abstraction, I'm also talking about non-objective. That means there's nothing in that painting that you can point to and say, that's a dog, that's a tree, that's a hill, right? It's just colors and shapes and lines. So De Broek, they still want to point at things that's wrong with society. So you have to put that in the picture. But the Blue Rider wants to talk about the spirit of the soul. Well, that's intangible. You can't touch your soul. You can't touch your spirit. So they're moving beyond, so they're talking about abstract things. They're going to make abstract art. So the Blue Rider is working mostly in Munich, and De Broek is working in Berlin and Dresden. Okay, today we'll take a look at Vasily Kandinsky. With a name like that, where does he sound like he comes from? It's not Germany. It's Russia, yes. Kandinsky is very Russian. He was born in Russia, and he moved to Germany. He was a major force in the Blue Rider, and he lived in Germany for many years, but he moved to France later in life when the Nazis came to power. So he dreamed of a better, more spiritual future through the transformative power of art. And like I said, he grew up in Russia, and he was heavily influenced by the Russian folk tales. In particular, St. George was a popular folk tale told in Russia. In fact, St. George is on the coat of arms of Moscow. And then you notice that it's a rider on a horse wearing blue. And that became an important symbol for Kandinsky. Also, when you think of writers and you think of writers throughout history, you might think about the four horsemen of the apocalypse, because also the Bible, the Book of Revelation, had an influence on Kandinsky, and he was very interested in the apocalypse. So these four writers of the apocalypse, they were destroyers of the world. But the apocalypse doesn't always mean the death of the world through war. It could mean the end of one generation and the beginning of another, or the potential for redemption. So let's go to this painting right here, actually called the Blue Reiter. And this was painted while Kandinsky was a symbolist painter. This is before he joined, or he created, the German expressionist group, the Blue Reiter. This is pre-German expressionism, and it has a lot of impressionism influence in this. But the theme of the horse and the rider appeared in many of his later works, and a lot of experts believe that this painting is where he got the name for the group, the Blue Reiter. Here's another one of his early paintings, and notice again the theme of people riding horses. So you have these horse riders at the bottom, and they could even be the four horsemen of the apocalypse. So the rider is a symbol, a personal symbol of Kandinsky's. And you can see that his work is becoming more abstract. Like this is much more abstract than that. And we're also getting into that flatter space. The bright colors that he's using is definitely influenced by Fauvism. They're using non-naturalistic color for recognizable objects. And in this painting right here, he's using a lot of the primary colors. We have a blue mountain, a yellow trees, and red trees. Then if you look closely at the riders on horseback, we have very indistinct edges. The riders mesh with their horses and each other, and this flattens the space. These could be almost like cutouts of construction paper all pasted together, right? It's very flat looking. And these bright colors are a symbol of hope, and the expressive brushwork is a symbol of hope. Once again, he's getting his influence from Russian folk art with these bright colors and these dark outlines. So in 1911, Kandinsky and others formed the Blue Reiter group, and they created this little booklet that they would hand out at their shows. And this is the cover for this booklet. And you can see that it is made with a woodcut print in these two different colors of black and blue. And this was a loose association of artists, and it only lasted about 3 years, from 1911 to 1914. What happened in 1914 that would disrupt them? Yeah, the war. And them living in Germany, like that was at the heart of the war. The other guy that's a part of this group is Franz Marc, and he also uses a lot of horses in his artwork, and he loves the color blue. So these two guys worked really well together. Both artists believed that blue was the most spiritual of the colors, and they both believed that the rider symbolized the ability to move beyond. Vasily Kandinsky actually wrote a book about color, wrote a book about art, and it spoke a lot about color theory. So the image on the left, that was the original cover of the book, and the image on the right is, if you go to Amazon and buy that book now, that's the current cover. So he wrote a treatise, and the treatise is different than a manifesto. Manifesto is rather short, and it just expresses the goals. But a treatise is a much more elaborate and long written explanation and exploration of the group's purposes and goals. So in this book, he discussed the ideas of spirituality as well as the relationship between art and music. This treatise focused on the group's pursuit of non-objective and abstract painting, and the book discussed the idea that the color and form carried spiritual values. Kandinsky wrote that painting could evoke sounds the way that certain music is called to mind when you see certain colors and forms. You ever heard of synthesism? They're exploring that. They're exploring that color and sound, and it's all intermixable. So I want to show you this one right here. I want you to look at the title. Where would you see another title like that? Yeah, musical compositions. So they are looking at, and they're trying to get away from things that relate to our world. So in this painting, there are some things that are recognizable. However, they are striving to be more and more abstract, and so their titles are becoming more abstract, like music titles are abstract. All right, can you see in this anything in this painting that reminds you of anything in the real world? Yeah, the rainbow is the easy one. Yes. Let me get my laser pointer. Over here and over here, these are groups of soldiers, right, marching. Here's three soldiers right here in the foreground. Right, these are their heads, and they're holding lances. Behind them is a hill, and on top of that hill is a castle. Here we have a mountain over here, and then behind it are either trees or more mountains. So there's things, even though it's very abstract, and if I hadn't pointed these things out, you might not have seen them. But once I did point them out, you can say, "Oh yeah, yeah, that kind of looks like a mountain. That kind of looks like this, and that kind of looks like that." All right, so it's heading towards complete abstraction, but it hasn't gotten there yet. So Kandinsky is beginning to create parallels between painting and music. He often named his artworks compositions or improvisations. And this was an attempt to make art that does not refer to the outside world. By eliminating references to the outside world, this was meant to express the spiritual essence of the subject instead of the subject itself. However, there are some references in this painting that I just went over. All right. So here's our next one. This is the one that I want you to remember for the test. So again, we have a title that is a reference to music. And between the years 1910 and 1914, Kandinsky is pushing his art further and further into abstraction. This painting right here is a total rejection of pictorial representation. He is totally getting rid of things that are a reference to the world. There are, in fact, some things that refer to this world in this painting, but it's his own personal symbolism that he uses. I think it refers to boats and oars in here, but there's nothing that we could recognize as a boat or oar. It just, he put in a symbol that means a boat or an oar to him, not necessarily to us or to people in general. But we're getting very close to absolute abstraction and non-objective art. Kandinsky wanted to communicate deeper themes and emotions common to all cultures and viewers. If you can let go of the idea that art is about stuff in the real world, then you are free of all the rules. You can explore a spiritual realm free from the constraints of the material. And the Blue Rider, the emphasis is on the inner or subjective mental state of the artist. So this painting is commonly cited as the pinnacle of Kandinsky's pre-World War I achievements. It's like his highest point as an artist. If we compare these two paintings, the painting on the right has totally rejected any sort of space that traditional paintings have given us. Traditional paintings have a background, a middle ground, and a foreground to give us a sense that things go back into space. Well, he is completely rejecting that idea. And we're back to the Egyptian style of art where everybody is paper thin and they're wedged between two pieces of glass, like a slide under a microscope. And Kandinsky is interested in the apocalypse and redemption. And can you see the cyclical process of destruction and salvation in this painting? Now, in this painting right here, I want you to notice the date on this one. It's a lot later, but he has finally achieved total abstraction or non-objective art. This is just a painting of colors, shapes, and lines. It's rational and geometric, whereas composition 7 is very emotional. And this painting right here that he's done, the composition 8, is very influenced by the Russians and what they did in art and their exploration of total abstraction and non-objective. We haven't quite gotten there yet. We're going to get there. But you can see that the Russians influenced his later work. All right, now on to our other Blue Rider, which is Franz Marc, this dapper guy in the cool hat. He's the co-founder of Blue Rider, and he perceives humans as deeply flawed. And his focus in his art is on color, similar to the Fauves and the post-impressionists. He's known for his images of brightly colored animals, especially horses. Mark was trying to convey the profound messages about humanity, the natural world, and the fate of mankind. As people struggled with a rapidly changing urban world on the precipice of war, that they are becoming more and more anxious. And so, human beings being deeply flawed, he turns to the animal world. Now, this painting right here is his early work. Look at the date on that. That's 1906. What style of art does that look like to you? It's Impressionism, right? And his work was very impressionistic early in his career. This is the art that we're going to be mostly looking at. But late in his career, he began to make things that were non objective. So let's take a look at the blue horses. Mark felt alienated from modern life. In fact, all of Europe was pretty alienated from modern life. He looked to the natural world as an antidote for modern life. He saw that nature and animals as spiritual and as a means of finding what had been lost in the modern era. And Mark considered animals to be closer to an innate natural state of spirituality that mankind had lost with civilization. He uses wild colors. Did you notice the wild colors? And not only do these colors express emotion or mood, but they have symbolic meanings. In 1910, he developed his color theory with Kandinsky, and he said that blue was a masculine color, and he saw yellow as a feminine, gentle, and serious color. Red is a brutal and heavy color. Red is the color that must be overcome by the other two colors, blue and yellow. So the blue Reiter artists believed that art was spiritual and it could heal those affected by the tensions boiling in Europe. Art was a way for man to connect with the spiritual roots. Painting animals was Mark's way to depict the purity of nature. Humanity is corrupted by industry and modern life, and humanity can't bond with nature as it did in its primitive form. The only way to access pure harmony and spirituality of nature is to access it through the world of animals. One thing I want you to notice in this painting is look at the curves at the tops of the horses and then notice the curves of the hills in the background. It's the same. That's what they call harmony in a work of art. That we have a lot of the sameness going on, and it makes it's a pleasant feeling or it's a pleasant thing to look at. All right, this next one is called the yellow cow. So that's the size of the artwork there in the center. In this painting, the cow dominates the foreground. It expresses a mood of blissful serenity. It's a happy cow. In third period, somebody said, "Oh, I thought the cow was dead." So the large yellow cow represents the feminine, and Mark saw the color yellow as evoking feminine emotions. The blue spots on its hide represent the masculine. So we have a combination of the two colors symbolize a merging of the masculine and the feminine. And this also could be like a yin and the yang. So there's a little bit of blue in the yellow, and if we had a flip side, there would be a little bit of yellow in the blue. And this painting is a reference to his marriage to his second wife in 1911. The cow represents the safety and security Mark felt in his second marriage. And notice how the blue hills in the background echo the shape of the cow's haunches, much like the hills in the background of the horse painting were the same as the curves on the horses. So this painting has very similar colors to Van Gogh's Night Cafe, but in the Blue Rider, their use of color goes a little bit more into the spiritual, whereas Van Gogh is, I don't want to say just exploring emotions. That's a pretty heavy thing to explore. But the Blue Rider, they're trying to go beyond just emotions into the spiritual. Our next artwork is this one right here. And notice how the horses are kind of stacked up on top of each other. That space is getting scrunched together, and the horses have nowhere to go but up. It's a very shallow space, like what we have in the Byzantine mosaics and the Egyptian painting. And we have this really strong diagonal, almost vertical line right here that helps give that sense of the verticality in the artwork. All right, moving on. I want you to know this one right here, The Fate of the Animals. It's a rather large painting, and this gives you a sense of the size of the artwork. Let's take a closer look. I want you to notice a unique thing about this painting. Do you see how the left side and the right side are different? All right, how are they different? Yeah, by color, right? The right side is what mostly like just browns and grays, whereas the left side is very quite colorful. This right here is damage to the artwork. The artwork was damaged in a warehouse fire in 1916. And this guy right here, who was a friend of the artist, painted the image back in. He had a photograph of the painting, and he painted over the damage that was done to the painting in the warehouse fire. However, what do you think photographs look like in 1916 or 1913? Yeah, they were black and white, right? So he didn't have color to work with. Can you see what this is a painting of? Do you see anything in this painting? You see fighting? What else do you see? Do you see animals? What animals do you see?
I see the bodies, but I don't know.
There's a green horse up here, maybe two of them. All right. Do you see a deer right here? There's the body, and its neck is arched up, and the legs are come down. There's a couple of animals over here, probably boars, like wild pigs. And there's a group of foxes all pointing their nose in this direction right here. All right, they have the sharp noses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a digital version of this painting right here so we can see it a little bit better. This is what it would have looked like without the damage. So as World War I approaches, look at the year that this was painted, 1913. Right? And everybody saw war on the horizon. There was war happening in the Balkans, and all the governments were what they call rattling sabers. They were saying bombastic things to get each other mad. And so everybody knew that a big war was just about to happen. So as World War I approached, his art became darker and more violent. He was increasingly pessimistic about the state of the world and humanity. By 1913, Marx's work had become increasingly apocalyptic. It was as if he anticipated both his own fate and that of Europe as a whole. His tense and conflicted feelings are evident in this painting from this time. He begins to see animals differently. He began to see animals almost as impure as human beings. So this image serves as a premonition to the horrors of war. It seems to show the world being utterly ripped apart. Look at all these strong diagonals. In fact, there's a lot of diagonals in this painting, and I talk a lot about diagonals. The diagonals really help to give a sense of movement in a work of art and energy and motion. And there's a lot of that in this painting. It almost looks like there's explosions happening, like the forest is being ripped apart and the animals are freaking out. So it shows some apocalyptic event destroying both the animals and the forest. And the animals seem to be trapped in the forest. And Mark is reflecting on society at the time, or on a lot of innocent people will die in the war to come. So fantasy is still an important feature in this work. But in this case, the fantasy has turned to dark and foreboding. Fires are raining down from above. Fallen trees jut out. All the animals are panicked. Bodies are contorted. And they are terrorized and trying to escape. But he places the symbol of hope in the center. That deer, that blue deer, is a symbol of hope for the future, maybe his own future, maybe the future of Europe. After a forest fire, life begins anew. And so the artist saw the coming war like that. Yes, there's going to be destruction, but it will be a necessary step towards progress. This is kind of a twisted logic. The colors in this painting are express severity, like brutality in bright colors. Basically what these artists are looking toward, their idea of the apocalypse is that once everything is like burned down to the ground, then we can build a new society, a better society after that. But I just think that's a very twisted way to do it. Anyways, his last few paintings, he was exploring non-objective art, and he was exploring pure abstraction. He joined the army and fought in the war. He died in Verdun in 1916. So that's him on the right in his soldier's uniform. And I'm hoping that he's with his mom in that one and not his drill sergeant. All right, any questions about the Blue Rider that we've looked at? All right.